Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to let your sports opinions fly for the main event. A 7-team elimination match to decide the District 4 3A Championship. Presented to you live by PilotPointBearcats.com. This 10-week match has been sanctioned by the University of Interscholastic League. Our celebrity referee for the District 4 3A show is none other than the daytime psychology professor, Texas high school football storyteller, North Texas insider, and DFW Inside High School Sports, the most feared member of the Texas high school mafia, the one, the only, small-town Dixie, the professor,
Showtime! From the shadows of South Fork Ranch just outside of Parker, Texas, the homestead of your Plano East Panthers, I am the Professor Matt Diggs, and it's important to bring up the Plano East Panthers because they are just one win away from perhaps breaking their playoff drought and making it into the playoffs for the first time since 2018. You might be thinking to yourself, this is the District 4 3A report. What does that really matter to anything? It's all interconnected because also at the time of this taping, you may have a little bit of a spoiler depending on when you are able to hear it. We are also just one win away from the Texas Rangers winning their first ever World Series. Is this a coincidence? Is this a false correlation? I don't think so. Very important information to know as we are starting out the District 4 3A report. And when we look at what happened last week and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen this week, there are all kinds of crazy things that could happen or will happen, especially when we look up at District 3 3A. There are some very, very crazy things in District 3 3A that we have to break down. Some of the craziest things I think I've ever seen in a potential playoff projection, which is going to have big implications for Brock and Paradise and whoever else makes the playoffs. But to get there, we have to know where we were coming from in the first place. But before we go there, I always strive for accuracy on the District 4 3A report. I'm not perfect, but I do strive for accuracy. And one pretty blatant inaccuracy last week, I want to go ahead and apologize and correct first thing, because again, this is an important thing as far as playoff projections and seeding goes. I cited that we might be seeing Brock versus Bushland in the third round because we saw Brock versus Bushland in the third round last year. However, as it was brought to my attention, and I should have known this, so this is just on me, Bushland actually lost last year to Shallow Water, I believe, in the regular season, which actually made Bushland second place. So that would have been second place versus first place at that point. So really, if Bushland gets to the third round, we might actually be seeing a Paradise versus Bushland third round game. So that's a very important information to know as we're kind of breaking down the playoffs and breaking that down. That was misinformation I shared last week, and I want to definitely get that corrected for this week. Next week, we'll really play bracketology. We'll rank the 16 teams that make the playoffs from 1 to 16, look at some potential playoff routes. It's kind of fruitless to do this, especially once you hear the District 3 3A scenarios and what's going on there. You'll realize that you could have a team be in first place or in fourth place. One team can be first, second, or third. Another team third or fourth. It is crazy in District 3 3A, which it was last year as well, which really speaks to the parity of that, which is going to show how important those very first round games are. Next week, we've got District 4 3A versus District 3 3A. If somebody's doing a District 3 3A report, I would fight them in a cage for you, my District 4 3A listeners, to advocate and support the District 4 3A cause. But to get there, we got to figure out what happened last week, what's going to happen this week, so we can get to next week. And the big game we were talking about last week was Whitesboro versus Paradise. And Paradise took care of business, winning that game 48-9, a complete domination. It was 28-2 at halftime. Whitesboro with the very rare safety to get going, and then Whitesboro did not score their first touchdown until the fourth quarter. This game started out big play. Landon Hawley from Austin Iglesias, 61-yard pass. 17 seconds into the game, Paradise has already got that 7-0 lead. Iglesias with a 61-yard run right after that, and then Dickens with a 1-yard run. So 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. Whitesboro did get that safety in the second quarter. Austin Iglesias ended the first half with a 22-yard run, and we're going into halftime. It is 28-2 Paradise. Paradise scores a touchdown in the third quarter, a Jennings 11-yard run to make it 35-2, and at that point we're kind of getting into garbage time. We do see Colt Fagan, the freshman phenom from Whitesboro, had a very nice game for Whitesboro in somewhat cleanup duty, 6 of 8 for 58 yards, and his first touchdown. I believe it's his first touchdown. I'm sure his daddy will let me know if it wasn't his first touchdown. Found Carter Sluter for the touchdown, 14-yard pass to Sluter for the score, and it is 35-9 at that point. Paradise put 2 touchdowns on the board, missed an extra point. That's kind of a problem with Paradise. Austin Iglesias with a 4-yard run, and then Barrett in cleanup duty, 27-yard run to make it the final 48-9. Whitesboro just could not get any offensive rhythm going. Had less than 100 yards passing and less than 100 yards rushing. So when you have that kind of going against you, it's very hard to find a lot of offensive consistency when some of your best players are just having a hard time. In fact, Colt Fagan was also the leading rusher for Whitesboro, the freshman. 13 carries for 33 yards. Max Parker only 12 carries for 20 yards. Carter Sluter trying to get your athletes the ball, 5 carries for 18 yards. Clay Hermes, our man, 8 carries for 8 yards on the play. Which, when you hear some of these other statistics we're going to talk about in Brock versus Ponder, when you hear those rushing statistics for their quarterback, 8 for 8 is looking pretty good at that point. Receiving, again, we talked about the Carter Sluter touchdown. Brett Donaldson was the leading receiver for those mighty Bearcats, 5 catches for 30 yards. And for Paradise, again, Austin Iglesias, what can he not do? As long as he stays healthy, he should be one of the best players on the field each and every game. He had 14 carries for 141 yards. Really did not have a great passing game. He only had 2 receptions that were caught. He threw the ball 7 times for 76 yards and had an interception as well. So a little bit to be worked on in the passing game with Paradise. But that rushing game, overall 35 rushes for 334 yards for those Paradise Panthers. And they took care of business 48-9. It was definitely a week of blowouts. Not much competitive. Pilot against Peaster. Peaster took care of business, ending the Pilot Point Bearcats' opportunity to make the playoffs, snapping a 6-year streak of them making the playoffs, winning 38-0. And Pilot Point just had no offense whatsoever in this game. Aiden Hamblin, the senior quarterback, 9 throws for 9 out of 27 for 43 yards, threw for 4 interceptions against the Peaster defense. Rushing the ball, they ran the ball 6 times for -3 yards. So you saw Pilot Point, they're going to this air raid kind of an offense, and that was the repercussions of it. Peaster's defense just completely shut them down. Peaster did throw an interception as well, but was pretty strong, rushing the ball and just dominating the clock and doing whatever they wanted to on the Pilot Point defense. 38-0. The Greyhounds now control their destiny as we are going into the final week. And then finally, we have Ponder versus Brock. Brock with a very nice win, putting up 69 points against the Ponder Lions, defeating the Ponder Lions 69-12. And Ponder, let's talk a little bit about the Ponder offense. Tyson Price did not have a great game, 5 of 11 for 167 yards. But Case Peacock, every time he threw the ball to Case Peacock, Peacock caught 2 passes for 145 yards. Both of them went for touchdowns, an 81-yard touchdown and a 64-yard touchdown. And these were in the second and third quarter, so we were not completely in trash time at that point. So Ponder did show a little bit of big play offense against Brock, but Brock just dominant, especially running the ball. I mean, these statistics running the ball are ridiculous for those Brock Eagles. Brody Woods, 9 carries, 161 yards, 73-yard long touchdown run in that game. He did not find the end zone, but Vance Guthrie did. And we talked about last week how Brock really needed to get Vance Guthrie going. To me, he's their most explosive runner, and you really got to get him going for the playoffs. And sure enough, they did. 10 carries for 70 yards, 3 of those going for touchdowns. Brett Tutter, 15 for 146. See, Brett, I can say Tutter. I got it. It's like butter. It's like Tutter. Brett Tutter. Somebody was indicating on the District 4 3A Report message board commentary that I was butchering Brett's name. And I can butcher some names. Clay Hermes can tell you I can butcher some names here on the District 4 3A Report. He was very kind as I called him Clay Hermes last year. I like that name. It's very regal. It's Hermes. I got that wrong for probably the first couple of years of the District 4 3A Report. But what matters now is I got it right for a senior year. He gets to have those clips that with his name sounded and said correctly. Cannon Stevens, talk about a change of pace back, 2 carries for 61 yards and a touchdown, and then a mop-up duty, Cody Farmer, 6 carries for 49 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, Carson Finney, what can we say about him? 4 receptions for 27 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Butler, not Butter. That would be Brett Tutter's, maybe his mashup name. Tyler Butler, 2 receptions for 40 yards. And Britton Burrows, we keep talking about him as being that really go-to receiver. If you need a first down, you can look for Britton Burrows. He has really stepped up this year, 2 receptions for 30 yards. And a personal favorite of mine, Jackson Hart, 1 reception for 19 yards, but that was a touchdown. If he catches the ball, he's going to score 6. That's what Jackson Hart does. And Brock just dominated this game. And I was mentioning the rushing statistics out there. You heard Pilot Point with some very bad rushing numbers. According to Max Preps, Tyson Price, and these are mostly sacks, I would imagine, rushed the ball 13 times for negative 56 yards. And the team rushed the ball 30 times for negative 33 yards. So 8 for 8 sounding pretty good. I believe that is the top rushing number for any of the teams that have lost. So as far as having any sort of multiplicity of or a magnified number of rushes, 8 for 8 is not too bad when you're looking at 13 for negative 56 and 6 for 2 with Pilot Point. So really, the District 4 3A Report has been about defense in the big dogs, and you can definitely see that with Brock. You saw that with Peaster, and now you see it. You saw it with Paradise as well. So this week, that leads us to try to figure out all of these playoff scenarios and figure out what we're expecting to happen. And the 2 games of note this week, we have Ponder versus Whitesboro. And if Peaster and Ponder win these games, you're going to have a 3-way tie at 3-3. Peaster is basically as high as you can be, guaranteed a spot in this tiebreaker because they won their game by a maximum amount, the maximum that this district will allow you to win a game in their system, and they only lost by 1. So you can't beat that. Winning by max, losing by 1. They're sitting at what we call 13 if we're looking at the tiebreaker. Whitesboro is currently sitting at 1, and Ponder is currently sitting at -14, which is the district max as far as that goes. So Whitesboro and Ponder play each other. We know in this hypothetical to even exist, Ponder must have beaten Whitesboro. So the way this is going to work is if Ponder beats Whitesboro, because in a three-way tie, Peaster is going to be guaranteed the third spot. If Ponder wins by 8 or more, then Ponder will get to that fourth playoff spot, and they will knock Whitesboro completely out of the playoffs. And you can see with Ponder's offensive explosions at times with Pilot Point and even being competitive against Brock, Ponder is certainly apt to do an offensive explosion against Whitesboro. Whitesboro's defense has been a little bit questionable at times. But if Whitesboro wins this game or loses by 7 or less, they will end up in either the third seed or the fourth seed. If they win, they will end up in the third seed. If they lose by 7 or less, Whitesboro will be the fourth seed in District 4-3A. So if Whitesboro wins, this opens up another playoff projection possibility. And if Whitesboro wins and Boyd defeats Peaster, now we have another three-way tie for 1 spot instead of 2 spots. And we know that Peaster has got that max win against Ponder. So they're sitting at 14. Boyd lost to Ponder by 6. And Ponder has played both games. So Ponder lost by 14. They lost by a lot more than 14, but that's the max that the play that you can get in the District 4-3A tiebreakers. And they beat Boyd by 6. So they are sitting at -8, which means that they could not advance out of that three-way tie. So it would either be Peaster or Boyd. And in that three-way tie, if Boyd can win this game by 10 or more, they would pass Peaster and get into that fourth playoff spot. So even though Boyd is sitting at 1-8 right now, they are looking at, okay, if we can find a way to beat Peaster by 10 or more and Whitesboro is able to beat Ponder, then we can jump into that playoff spot. Now, if Whitesboro wins that game and Boyd beats or if Ponder wins that game against Whitesboro, then that game doesn't really matter at that point. You've got Ponder and Whitesboro and potentially and Peaster in that tiebreaker. But if Whitesboro wins the game, now Boyd has a chance. So Boyd will be playing with everything they've got because they at least as until they get updates, they have every chance to control their destiny to win this game by 10. Brock, on the other hand, Brock is just sitting there like, okay, we got this. And we are the number 1 seed, even if we did lose to Pilot Point this week. We are the number 1 seed in District 4-3A, and we just have to wait for what's happening in 3A to figure it out, and we'll see what's going to go on there. Pilot Point, we know they are done. They are out of the playoff race, so we still have 6 teams that can get playoff spots. And Paradise, we don't really get to talk about Paradise because they drew the Week 11 bye, so they are done. And Paradise will probably be watching some football this week to figure out who they might be playing and who they could play as the number 2 seed. They will be playing the number 3 seed in District 3-3A, and that could be just about anybody at this point. So let's kind of break down District 3-3A, as that will be the first round opponents. And I'm not going to guarantee accuracy because I don't cover District 3-3A. I'm not looking at the tiebreakers. But numerically, these make sense. There's not a lot of craziness because of who has beaten who. So we do know that all 4 teams have clinched. Clyde, Tuscola Jim Ned, Iowa Park, and Vernon are all in the playoffs. Breckenridge and Bowie, regardless of what they do this week, they cannot make the playoffs. So we got our 4 teams. And so we know that the 4 teams, we don't even know the 4 teams in our district. We know Brock and Paradise know. You can look at District 3-3A, and you're going to get one of those 4 teams for sure. But they got to look over here at us and go, well, it could be Whitesboro, it could be Ponder, it could be Peaster, it could be Boyd. So they're trying to figure things out as well. So when you look at who has played who, Iowa Park lost to Vernon earlier in the year. Jim Ned lost to Clyde earlier in the year. Clyde lost to Iowa Park earlier in the year. And Vernon has lost to Jim Ned and Clyde. So that creates a scenario where we've got Clyde sitting at 3-1, Jim Ned sitting at 3-1, Iowa Park sitting at 3-1, and Vernon sitting at 2-2. Jim Ned and Iowa Park are going to play this week. Vernon is going to play 1-7 Bowie, and they are going to be a big favorite in that game. But even if they hypothetically lost that game, they already beat Breckenridge, so they would win all tiebreakers as far as that goes. And the only other team that could drop to 2-3 in district is Breckenridge, so they're guaranteed. They lose to Bowie, they're still the 4th spot guaranteed. Then they're looking at Brock in the first round. Clyde, sitting at 3-1, they are going to be playing Breckenridge this week. Breckenridge at 1-3. Clyde should be a favorite over Breckenridge this week. But again, if they lose, there are some scenarios that could happen if they dropped off a little bit. The big game this week is going to be Jim Ned versus Iowa Park. Now, we know Iowa Park has lost to Vernon, but they beat Clyde. Jim Ned lost to Clyde, but they beat Vernon. So a lot of craziness there. One of these teams is going to win the game, and they will go to 4-1. And one of these teams will lose the game, and they will go to 3-2 in the district play. So the way I see it with Iowa Park, most likely, if Iowa Park wins this game, they will go to 4-1, which means that they are going to be the district champions. And because if Clyde wins, Iowa Park beat Clyde head-to-head. There's only 2 teams there, so Iowa Park would get that first seed at 3-1 or at 4-1. Now, if Iowa Park loses to Jim Ned, that means that they would go down to 3-2. Now, if Vernon loses, that 3-2 would put them at 3rd place. So Iowa Park could theoretically get 3rd place if Vernon loses to Bowie this week, which again is not very likely. But if it did, they would fall in the 3rd spot because they would be 3-2, and then Vernon would end up at 2-3 under that hypothetical. But if there is a tie at 3-2, and the only 2 teams there are Iowa Park and Vernon, well, Vernon beat Iowa Park, therefore Vernon would get the 3rd seed, and Iowa Park would get the 4th seed. And this is one of the crazier things that I've seen. So Iowa Park will either be the 1st seed, most likely, if in most scenarios, or they will be the 4th seed, most likely in all scenarios. The only way that they could get the 3rd seed, again, is if Vernon loses to Bowie this week, which Vernon is a 25-point computer favorite, and according to Massey, is like a 95% chance of winning that game. But in Week 11, those 5% chances hit enough. When you're talking about 300 games, the odds of one of those upsets happening does tend to happen every now and then. But from my perspective, we're going to see Iowa Park either be the 1st seed or the 4th seed. Now, Jim Ned could be the 1st seed, 2nd seed, or 3rd seed. So if Clyde and Iowa Park win, you're going to see Iowa Park number 1, Clyde number 2, Jim Ned number 3, and Vernon number 4. Now, if Clyde and Jim Ned win, then you're going to see Clyde 1, Jim Ned 2, because those are the 2 teams that are at 3-1. Clyde beat Jim Ned head-to-head. So you got Clyde 1, Jim Ned 2, then Vernon 3, and then Iowa Park 4, based on what we talked about with Iowa Park and Vernon potentially being 3-2, both of those teams being 3-2. Now, again, this is the assumption that Vernon is able to beat Breckenridge. Now, if we have a situation where Breckenridge and Iowa Park win, so if Breckenridge does pull the upset this week, then you would have Iowa Park 1, Clyde 2, Jim Ned 3, and Vernon 4. And then if you have a scenario where Breckenridge and Jim Ned both win, and that can flip the Jim Ned and Clyde calibration, and then you're going to have Jim Ned 1, Clyde 2, Vernon 3, and Iowa Park 4. So Iowa Park is looking at either getting a game against Brock or getting a game against the 4th seed in District 4 3A, which could be Whitesboro, Ponder, Peaster, or Boyd, depending on how things go. So that is some crazy calibration over there. Now, if you ask me what's going to happen, I think Jim Ned will beat Iowa Park this week. I think Clyde will beat Breckenridge, and I think Vernon will beat Bowie. So if that happens, and all 3 of those things happen, then you're going to have, for me, you're going to have Clyde 1, Jim Ned 2, Vernon 3, Iowa Park 4, which means Paradise would play Vernon in the first round. Then you would also have Clyde starting out with our 4th seed. You would have Iowa Park playing Brock, and then our third seed would play Jim Ned. So lots of crazy things that could be happening in District 3A, and almost everybody, as far as I can see, Vernon can only be 3 or 4. Iowa Park can be 1 or 4 most likely, but they could be 3 if Vernon did slip up. Clyde could be 1 or 2, and Jim Ned could be 1, 2, or 3. So when you look at district now, do you see why I'm not even going to attempt to play bracketology this week when it comes to that? Because so much craziness that could be happening in District 3A, my head will just spin trying to go with that. So when we look at District 4-3A, we already talked about those tiebreakers. This week we've got Brock versus Pilot Point. I think Brock will be a heavy favorite against Pilot Point. I think Brock will probably hold back some starters to get some make sure everybody's healthy. The last thing you want to do is get an injury going into the playoff run. So I think Brock will probably take it easy, rest starters a little bit quicker than they might otherwise start out with. But I do think that they will probably take care of Pilot Point and win that game, probably by at least 60. Now, Whitesboro and Ponder, this is really the game that brings out those tiebreakers that we talked about. And Ponder has definitely played up and down with I think they have the most variability in their team in this schedule. I think Peaster has probably been the most compact team. Peaster is going to give you a pretty consistent performance every single week. Peaster took care of Ponder pretty handily. They played Whitesboro to 1 point, but Ponder, again, we think about that St. Pius game, and you think about what they did to Pilot Point and that kind of that high-end ceiling that they've got. But they also have shown, like against Peaster, that they will lay a little bit of an egg on you. I think when you look at this, Ponder is going to be able to score against Whitesboro's defense, but Whitesboro should probably be able to move the ball pretty consistently against Ponder as well. I think we're going to have an absolute shootout. I think Whitesboro will hang on and win a very high-scoring game, like a 42-40, 42-35 type of game, where you're going to see 6 touchdowns versus 5 touchdowns. Ponder, what they're going to have to do is find a way to force penalties and find a way to force turnovers, more specifically against Whitesboro. And if you can get turnovers, you can get Whitesboro in second and 20, second and 25 situations by getting in their head and just putting the pressure on them and making them feel the pressure. I think that's how you can get a couple of stops. I think in a traditional 10-yard setup, Whitesboro is probably going to be able to move the ball pretty consistently against Ponder. It's those down and distances where they're behind the chains and having to go 20, 25 that I think Ponder could get those stops and force those stops. And then turnovers and special teams. Can they make a play there? I think Whitesboro, they have enough senior leadership, enough talent. I think they'll be able to match Ponder score for score, and I think Whitesboro will get that win to lock in their third seed, which means they're going to look over there and try to figure out who the second seed is going to be out of all of that mess. And as of right now, I've got Jim Ned as that second seed if everything goes the way I think it will go. Now, who knows if it will go the way I think it will go, but that is very much the way I think it will go. And then finally, on the bottom side of the district, Peaster versus Boyd. Again, the way Peaster has played defensively, completely shutting out Ponder, shutting out Pilot Point, they've shown that defensive prowess is going to play at a high level, and defense travels very well. I think Peaster against Boyd has been prone to turnovers. I think and they can't stop the running game. I think Peaster will take care of Boyd and eliminate that potential playoff hypothetical. I think Peaster is probably a 3-score favorite over Boyd, whereas I think Whitesboro is only a 1-score favorite over Ponder. So if all those things happen, if my projections happen, you'll have Brock 1, Paradise 2, Whitesboro 3, Peaster 4, and that would create a first round setup where you would have Brock versus Iowa Park, you would have Paradise versus Vernon, you would have Whitesboro versus Jim Ned, and you would have Clyde versus Peaster in the first round. And it's weird because I think that Peaster has a really good chance to pull an upset, because I was talking on Twitter this week that I think Clyde is a little bit overrated as a one seed, and I think you can see that this past week as they lose to Iowa Park. That they're not this dominant team. I think Bushland is a somewhat dominant team in Region 1. But I think all of these teams in District 3A are very good teams. They're all probably a step below Brock and Paradise. They're all probably a step above the Whitesboro, Ponder, Peaster, Boyd realm. But certainly a turnover or two in Peaster playing really good defense and getting at that level. Toller would be a favorite over Clyde. So I think that one game that Peaster played early in the year kind of gives them that mindset. Remember, with Brock and Paradise, the metaphor we gave was that Paradise, this is the best team. When they see Brock across the field, that's the best time. That's the best team they've seen this year. But Brock is looking at Paradise. This is only the fourth or fifth best team. And I think when you look at Peaster is going to look across the field and say, we've seen Brock, we've seen Paradise, we've seen Toller. Bring it on, Clyde. And I think that could be a potential upset. But that's for next week, because we don't even know. It could be Iowa Park. It could be Jim Ned. We don't know who that first seed will be out in District 3A. But next week we will know, and we will have bracketology to break it all down. This week was Snapshot week, and not a lot of the numbers are in yet. We're still trying to figure that out, but we do know there will be changes. And we do know in the District 4 3A report that change is inevitable. We do know that changes happen. Pilot Point, for instance, how many coaches have they changed over the last couple of years? And you see Pilot Point, and obviously this show is powered by the pilotpointbearcats.com, which is not affiliated with Pilot Point ISD. Always important to note that. And I know Pilot Point is hurting right now, and I know Pilot Point is a little mad and a little sad, and they're looking at realignment, and there's all this growth in the Denton County corridor, and they're not seeing it. Tioga is seeing a lot of the growth over there. So changes. I think of Pilot Point and I think of changes, and this is definitely something that I don't know what the answers are for Pilot Point. I look at 6 really good programs. I look at Brock is going to be going up to District 4, or not District 4, but Class 4, Division 2, Class 4 2A, Class 4 2A, 4A Division 2. Try saying that a couple of times. You talk about the District 4 3A report, trying to calibrate District 3 3A, and then you have Brock moving up to 4A Division 2. It just goes all over the place. Paradise may drop down to Division 2 in 3A. We have Whitesboro showing some growth. I think they had a number just over 500, if I remember right. Ponder, Peaster showing some growth. Boyd a little less compacted over there. And then Pilot Point has an area of high growth, but they're not quite getting that growth. So what will be the changes that Pilot Point would need? You can probably go to a Pilot Point town hall for all the information on that. I don't necessarily have all of the answers for Pilot Point, but I do have the questions, and I do think there will be changes. So for all of our friends at pilotpointbearcats.com, and for all of the friends who join us on the District 4 3A report every week, and again, if I messed up anything, please let me know, and I'll tweet it out. I'll get out an immediate correction. I think I've got this District 3 3A breakdown effective, and I think I've got the District 4 3A breakdown effective, but you never know. And if there need to be changes with me, hey, I'm open to changes as well. So for all of our friends, and next week we have playoff football on the horizon. We'll see you down the road.
It hurts so bad in my life. It's gotta be a change in my life. Somebody gotta help me. And this is the part have turned to tears. Wish I could go back and change these years. I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it. Lord, it hurts so bad in my life. It's gotta be a change in my life. Somebody gotta help me.
I don't tell people that they're okay the way they are. No, I say, no, you could be way more than you are. If you're in a dark and terrible place and someone says you're okay the way you are, then you don't know what to do about that. No, I'm not. I'm having a terrible time and I'm hopeless. You're okay the way you are. Well, then what? That's it? That's where I am? And you could be way better. You could be incomparably better across multiple dimensions. And that will give you the antidote to the suffering.